Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast, Smart Man, Smarter Woman, a podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. And thank you very much for joining us today. I'm Steve Lotz.
And I'm Juliet Aurora.
And we are your co-hosts. But before I introduce our very special guest for today's show, let's hear a few words from my wonderful co-host, the smarter woman herself, Juliet. How are you doing today, Juliet? How was your drive? You went for a drive there, I heard, with the roof down and the wind blowing in your hair. And how was that?
It was excellent. I was feeling a little overwhelmed and claustrophobic and just needed to get out and kind of do nothing. So I got in my car, turned up some tunes, and drove for about an hour. And I could literally feel my blood pressure dropping as I was driving. So it was perfect.
Awesome. Well,
everyone is having to deal with different things and cope with things in different ways at this time.
Perfect.
Looking forward to today's show. I have known our guest for many, many years, and he is probably, and I'm going to steal a word, Steve, he is probably the least lawyerly lawyer, try saying that 5 times, that I know. But I think that there is so much value that we're going to get out of today's conversation. So looking forward to it.
Okay, well, you and I are going to have to discuss that off air because I got in big trouble, gang, for saying the word lawyerly because I was informed there was no such word. And now the smarter woman is using that word. So we absolutely need to get into that off air. But anyway, as I mentioned at the beginning, you don't want to hear us, you want to hear the guests. So let's get to that. Our podcast, as you guys know, is for entrepreneurs, and our goal with every episode is hopefully to provide you with a little entertainment, but most importantly, some value, some insights, a gold nugget or two would be great that can help you on your own entrepreneurial journey. And we have a great show for you today. It's always kind of fun when we have a guest that we've known for a little while. And Andrew Brown is the principal of the law firm Brown Lawyers. You will know you have arrived at the right website, which is brownlawyerspc.com, when you come to the home page to find an image of a large elephant balancing on a large ball. Which I have to admit, I love the imagery, but that's certainly not your typical imagery when you go to a lawyer's website, which is, I think, what I loved about it. But I think as you'll learn as we have our chat, Andrew was far from your typical lawyer, which is why we invited him onto the show. So without further ado, let's bring our guest into the show. Andrew, thank you for joining us today, all the way from Hamilton, Ontario.
That's right. Yeah. And just to be clear, yes, we are part of Amalgamated Hamilton, but we have to make sure it is Waterdown that we're in right now. But thank you very much for having me. It's great to be on with you guys. You've actually helped me fulfill one of my entrepreneurial goals was to be on this podcast. So it's, you're really helping me, bring me along and fulfilling the dream. So thank you for that.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Well, I'm glad we can help with that. And I feel quite honored that you're happy to be on the podcast. Well, hopefully you're still happy when we're done. But we'll see how that goes. But as Juliet mentioned, we met Andrew several years ago for the first time when we belonged to the same networking group. And since that time, full disclaimer here, we have used Andrew's services and have always been very impressed with his, not just his work ethic, but just his professionalism overall. There's lots to get into today that I think is going to benefit you guys. But before we do that, perhaps we can have Andrew begin by sharing a little of his own entrepreneurial journey. What led you to where you are today, Andrew?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's always interesting to hear all entrepreneurs' origin stories. And mine begins with my family, especially my oldest brother, Nick, who has been a tremendous influence on me. He's, and when I emphasize older, he's about 8 years older than I am. I've got 2 older brothers, 8 and 7, and then there was me down the road. So my brother Nick he's a financial advisor and started his own business while I was still in high school. And he'd been an entrepreneur all along, owning a hot dog stand and other sort of operations and selling things in university. You can take that for what that is. But when he was done in university, he quickly became an independent financial advisor, right? Kind of investments, retirement savings, insurance products, things along those lines. But what that really spoke to me as, and again, I'm a kid in high school. I remember coming down to visit Nick, I think some spring, it might have been March break, something like that. It must have been later in spring, because it was Tuesday or so and he was golfing. And that's really what clued me. I'm like, hey, you know what? Being your own boss, doing your own thing, running your own business, if that means you can golf on Tuesdays, then sign me up, right? And when I was going through and high school in Ontario and doing university selections, that was kind of preordained for me. Didn't give that much thought, but was the idea that, look, one day I'm going to be my own boss. And I kept that attitude all the way through. And that's really where it came to be. Now, nothing really materialized for me in certain terms of directions. I took a liberal arts degree, but when it came down to it, and I was getting to my last co-op term in university and was about to graduate within 8 months, it's kind of like, okay, what next? Where am I going to go? And some of you might say, well, why would I go for a liberal arts degree if I wanted to go into business? Well, I asked around, and the feedback I got when, like, oh, should I go into, get a bachelor's in business administration, things like that. What I was told was, you can get the business skills anytime, anywhere. What really benefits you is what else can you bring to the table, right? What other kind of education can you bring to the table? And so I did an arts degree, but what happened was I had a classmate of mine that was going into looking at writing the LSAT, which is the law school admission test. I never thought about being a lawyer. I was not, nobody in my high school, no one in my town didn't even have a lawyer growing up. And so it really hadn't crossed my mind. But what I did know was, you know what, that seems like a decent way that you can become your own boss. There's a lot of lawyers that are their own bosses. And so I started to poke around that a little bit. And lo and behold, I barely qualified to get into law school based on my grades. And I had to take this test. And so during my last co-op term, about, again, 6 months before I graduated, took this test and did really, really, really well. And I was like, okay, well, I guess this is what I'm doing. And so fast forward a little while, part of my discussions when I was entertaining law school, and once my family was kind of blown away, it's like, oh, wait a second, this kid actually he is smart, right? And there's something to him, right? And I remember being in a car, driving a long road trip with my brother Nick back up to our hometown. And he was like, Andrew, if, with what we do as financial advisors, and with you going to law school, if you focus on estate planning, wills, estates, trusts, those kinds of things, we could share a client base really, really easily. And I'm like, cool, that sounds like a good idea. That I know what the demographics look like. We didn't have that much experience with those, but I had known some families, and there was a gap, certainly. So those services would be in demand. So that which is unlike most lawyers, I went into law school going, this is where I'm headed. I'm headed to an estate planning practice to deliver these services and to build a business so I could golf on Tuesdays. I, got kind of waylaid along the way. I worked at a big Bay Street firm, summered and articled, really just for that experience and the money, because I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be on the streets delivering this. I didn't know what this looks like. And then when I graduated and got called to the bar, became a lawyer, worked at a small firm in the East Mountain in Hamilton, and cut my teeth there doing, a Main Street practice, right? That you see basically any town in almost any North American town or city, doing a lot of real estate transactions, doing some basic wills, doing some basic business, incorporations, things like that. After about 20 months of doing that, of entertaining, hey, do I want to take over from these old guys? And then recognizing, no, I don't want to be in business with these guys. I want to do this on my own. And in fact, if these turkeys can make a go of it, heck, I know I can too. Right? It's what it comes down to. And that's coming up on 9 years ago this September. And basically, I just had my Karen and I, my spouse, our first daughter was born in March. And I thought it was a good time in August that we bring our income down to zero and start off on my own. And I have not looked back since, right? Was able, didn't own a house at that, so all the expenses were minimized, right? Could cover that, had a bit of a cushion, not a lot, but basically within 3 months, I had replaced my wage that I was making at that firm with what I was generating on my own. And so in the subsequent years had really just grown from there, and recognized Waterdown as an emerging. My family was in, my brothers and my mom were all living in Waterdown. Waterdown needed the service. And so focused on that market and focused on what I knew, which was real estate transactions, wills, and basic business stuff. And one of the things was I recognized, got busy, and really just by networking, just by knocking on doors, going to see banks, going to see real estate agents, and really grew it that way. But I wanted to see a quicker growth. Bottom line is I wanted to make more money quicker. I bridged the old, called the Gen X millennial demographics, and I can recognize a bit of a piece in both of the stereotypes of, well, I want it now. So one way I did that was an opportunity came up to take over from a retiring lawyer, essentially buy their book of business, which is not very common amongst those sorts of business. But again, I've been influenced by my brother Nick and how he had grown his business, and he had done that quite successfully in their industry. And it made sense to me to try that. The price seemed right because no one had really investigated this. Like, they've been buying and selling practice for a long time, but we'll get into this a little bit. But our industry, the legal industry, especially these types of practices, are really underdeveloped in terms of building them as a asset, as a business, right? They're usually just a service, and you make your money while you're working, and then when you're done, it all disappears. Or if you can get someone to take your will deposit, so be it. But so I paid some money. I got a loan from my brother, and in fact was able to as well leverage the relationship that the lawyer I took over from, with his relationship with his bank, and that's what gave me the money so I could pay Nick back. But what that did, so that was about a year into my practice as of starting on my own and in my business, was it really got me a team as well. And I didn't have that. I had one person 3 months into it that I was like, okay, I got 6 real estate transactions going on, and there's just me for this week. So I need someone, right? And I need someone's help. And so made a couple calls. There was a very young new law clerk that I had met through the previous business, my previous employment. And so I called her up, and she and I were a team of 2, and we were road warriors, and we went around the place. But when I bought the practice, that brought on other experienced members, right? Law clerks, legal assistants that have been doing it for 3 years. And that really helped me leverage a lot of my time and the resources, because all those things that I was doing before, now I had competent people to do it, right? And my attitude going in was like, well, this guy was making money, very consistent over the 5 years that I had reviewed. So I was like, okay, if that's not broke, let's not fix it. What I recognized over time was, as I got more experience, developed my own style, was, okay, things aren't as perfect, or as good as they would want to be, and I need to make some changes there. And about that same time, Karen, my spouse, who was also a lawyer, she came on board as well. She was at the time, she was a family law lawyer, gaining those skills. And she had helped me out quite a bit in the beginning while she was on mat leave, because, I'm very much, I've always put myself out there, and hopefully the story will tell. I was an entrepreneur that happened to be a lawyer. Okay, and not the other way around. I think most lawyers, what I've learned about our industry is that most lawyers are accidental business owners, right? They're lawyers first, and then they're business owners. And that, I think, really informs how they ended up where they are, how we don't build an asset, or the typical model is not to build an asset. But that's never been my style, through some some education as well to recognize, okay, look, you need a team. This isn't just about you. You're not the only one. I don't want people to call Brown lawyers and go, well, I only deal with Andrew. It's like, in fact, I really just want, I want Andrew Brown to be a ghost. I don't want anyone to know who Andrew Brown is. That's where I'm going with this, right? Now that has been, it's easier said than done for the most part. And we've had many iterations over the years. But when Karen came on board, that helped tremendously because there are so many things that I was weak at, okay? I was good at relationships, at developing, at sales, at giving people comfort, and good, with clients, right in front of them to be able to, distill, complex, legal systems and trying to get people the best of it and making people feel comfortable. Really, that was my strength. But my management abilities, right? Managing a team, compliance even, right? Keeping on top of that. Like bookkeeping, I was never going to do, right? Like I didn't even attempt to do that, right? For a long time. Well, the first couple months, my whole practice was on a flash drive, right? And it was an Excel, my trust account ledger was an Excel spreadsheet, right? In different spots, right? And so I was never going to do that. And I always hired people, for proportionately, right? I didn't have a full-time bookkeeper because I didn't need one, but I had people to do that. But what Karen brought to the table was I certainly recognized my management style. Whatever the opposite of a micromanager is, that was me, okay? So basically, I would not delegate, I would abdicate, right? And it's like, okay, look, we're all professionals here. You've done this lots before. You can just do your job. If you don't know what it is, figure it out. And of course, doors always open. Doors always open, right? Kind of thing. Well, and is there any wonder I didn't get the results, from the teams that I wanted, right? And it's like, oh, why is going to, how come no one cares about, as much as I do and things along those lines? What Karen really brought to the table was more of a focus on the team and the communication and the operations and the compliance, right? And that really was the yin and the yang that my business needed. And that, certainly her role is maybe not as, it's definitely not out front, but it was absolutely crucial to how we did things because it really helped fulfill a vision. Because I did, as I'm gaining more and more experience as the years go by, just recognizing my dissatisfaction with how legal services, when it comes to whether it's estate planning, and any issues involving a family and a business and family businesses and business succession planning, how unsatisfying and how they are not meeting the needs of the market, meaning our community, right? And because there's the same issues coming in over and over again, and really folks treating it like a transaction, right? Using their lawyer as a necessary evil.
We will continue with our conversation right after this message from a friend of the show. AIS Solutions is an award-winning cloud accounting firm serving small business all across Canada. If you want to migrate to a powerful and effective paperless accounting system and get your financials wherever you are, whenever you want them, then contact AIS Solutions team of trained professionals today at www.aissolutions.ca. And now, back to our conversation.
And not really using it for the advice angle and things along those lines. So I really we had to focus and go, well, how are we going to do this? If we see these issues all the time, what are we doing about it? And that really speaks to the, kind of the entrepreneurial, lessons that I've learned is that, you're going to be a lot more successful when you can focus on, the result that your services are bringing. And bottom line for us is this improving the lives of our community, right? Is what we're doing improving the lives of our community? And I made the stark realization is that if we just keep, pumping out wills or real estate transactions or businesses, it's like, hey, lawyer, I want you to do this. Hey, no problem. We can do that for you. Is this a good thing for you? Is this actually going to accomplish what you want to accomplish? That's not what you're paying me for. Okay, we're not going to look at that. And so here's your service. Is it going to be good? I don't know. Again, we're not canvassing that. Just all right. And here's your, not that very big of a bill, because really we're just focused on turnover. We're focused on transaction. And that is the vast majority. And, unless they're litigation lawyers, which is just based on bottom line, making money off of people's problems, making money off of people's mistakes. That's where I saw the deficiencies in the business model for being a lawyer and that traditional delivery of practices. So that's when we started to really focus on the message and why we existed. In addition to that, over the years from there, we've acquired 2 more practices, whether from retiring lawyers or deceased lawyers. At one point, we were up to 4 lawyers, 14 team members, 3 locations. And that's only changed within the last year. But, so we've seen the iterations. I had a vision there for a while of being able to scale and offer the same thing in all these locations. But there was a stark realization again last summer, was to go and look, this isn't going the way we want it, not because we're losing money or things along those lines. We're doing okay, but I feel like I'm busting my butt way too hard, only to subsidize everybody else. And my headspace, I got 3 little kids, right now they're 9, 6, and 4. I was always conscious that the business needed to adjust to my life. And so even from the very beginning, like I said, I started with an infant at home. And so I wanted to be home. And the benefit of doing estate planning is you hear the stories from, a lot of business owners, most likely, predominantly men, who are doing their estate planning, and otherwise our society would look at them as successes, right? A successful business that they've maybe sold, certainly the balance of their bank account, right? Their achievements in business. But I'll tell you, those guys got regrets, right? And they're very significant regrets, because for them to get where they wanted to go and have those, what our society would deem as success, other things were out of balance. And what that meant was they missed time at home. They missed time away from their spouses and being a part of those years when, frankly, what I've kind of put together was your kids don't need your money, right? When they're young, they just need your time, right? And I was conscious of that and purposeful about that. And so whatever I did, I had to figure out how to do this within a 9 to 5, right? I had to work smarter, not harder, as a part of it. And
I'm gonna interrupt you for a second, Andrew, only because you have given so many things. I want to drill down into some of those pieces of your story.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off, but I think you said a couple things that are really important that I actually want to spend a little bit of time for our audience in diving into it. The first one was, that you were an entrepreneur that happened to be a lawyer, as opposed to the other way around. So very intentional at the onset that you wanted to be in business, and legal services were just what you happened to provide. But you were also very intentional from the very beginning about building an asset. So can you kind of drill down into that for our audience as to what you mean by, rather than building a business, which is what a lot of people say, you've specifically said building an asset. So can you give a little clarity around that? Yeah.
So I had to learn that, right? Because I had only been presented with one model, and that was, when you're a lawyer, your brand is you, right? And that's it. And that's what you trade on from here on out. And you make your money during the time that you're working. When you're not working, you're not making money, right? And I did start off kind of with that in mind, because that's all that's been presented to me early on, with the help of a business coach, shout out Dan Holstein, right? It was a mindset switch. And this was very, very early on, because unlike my brother Nick, I had not owned a business when I was in high school or going through this was my first business. And looking back, I was like, yeah, I was ignorant, right? To think that I could do this on my own, or I had the answers. And because the truth is, I tell this to my kids all the time, a truly wise person knows that they know nothing, right? Like I hammer that into them, and to be able to know that. And he opened my eyes to go, well, that's just what you're telling yourself, right? Like that's the story you're telling yourself about so you're fulfilling that way. But the truth is, you can have it any way you want. And I'm like, well, I want to build an asset. And I don't want this to be all about me. And so how that came to be about going forward was that meant I had to leverage and have the team like leverage, what our coaches say, right? Leverage team, leverage systems. And so what that means is you have to build all these things from the outside, right? And be purposeful about that. Part of the challenge is like, okay, well, if I get another lawyer on board, what's stopping that lawyer from just getting the knowledge and then taking off, right? What am I going to do then, right? Oh, that's what's going to happen. Well, some of it is going, well, culture matters, right? Culture of an organization isn't just easily transferable. It's not easily purchased. You can't just take it off a shelf, right? And so when you can build a business that people want to work at, that is successful, that does good things, that gets good feedback, that encourages people to, not just team, but clients, customers, to grow personally and do good things in the community, then people are going to be attracted to that, and they're going to stick around for that. And also, it's not easy starting a business, right? It takes.
Sure it is. Of course it is. Everybody says it is.
Yeah, continue, right? Like, the idea of like, not everyone is built with that innate courage or self-belief, right? Or just to be able to go, I'm me, and so I will force this thing into success, right? That doesn't mean necessarily next year or even 5 years from now, but I will this because I'm me. I will believe this is be done. So building that asset meant that I had to figure out and focus on areas of law where I could deliver it. So it couldn't just be me, right? Or it could be if we bring someone in to deliver the service, as well as to empower the team members, the non-lawyer people on our team, to be able to where is actually the only things that a lawyer can do, because let's get everybody else to do things beyond that, right? And so that's how it began, to be able to get to a spot where you build an asset. Where it evolved to today is how important marketing is, right? How important branding is, right? Because that's how we differentiate ourselves from everybody else that hangs out their shingle, because we represent something. And that brand ultimately is what we're going to be able to sell, in addition to the systems of delivery, right? And the tools that we've created over the years to assist people to help them do with what they come here for. But this is where we're at our stage right now, is to take it to that next level where we're bringing in a marketing system so that future work is not going to depend on Andrew Brown being there, because people will come because they come not for Andrew Brown, but they come for the feeling that they get from us and the confidence they have. And so everybody, and I've been told this many, many times from clients, like, whether you talk to me or whether you talk to, Heather or Jay or anyone at our office, they will receive the same type of experience, right? The same type of, well, it's friendliness, it's compassion, it's listening, it's not button up, right? It's very much relaxed. It's like you're talking to a neighbor, right? And someone who gets it, but at the same time, knowledgeable, certainly more than competent and experienced, and having some emotional intelligence that goes along, knowing what people are going through, or at least being open to trying to represent that. And this is where I'm at now, is to, putting all those things together to package so that it can be a saleable asset. Not quite there yet, but because it is going to be, keeps leveraging our marketing system and our position in the market, then someone can step in here with a little bit of training or a little bit of competencies that they've developed elsewhere, and then going, okay, this is how we deliver the services. It's all laid out for us. Certainly not, it's not a McDonald's franchise system where it's 2 squirts of ketchup on this, right? But the nuance behind all of that is going, okay, well, this is how we handle that. And what I recognized was all the practices that I took over had none of that, right? Had none of that, right? It was a phone number, and it was a client base, and they came back because they had a good experience. And they do the cardinal sin of all, business owners. It's like, well, why? What makes you different? What makes people come to you? It's like, oh, it's customer service. It's customer service. They come because, but everybody says customer service, right? Everybody says it.
Yeah, well, you never hear any business owner say, we give lousy customer service and that's why they come to us, right? I mean, I've never heard a business owner say that. And I think one of the advantages you have, and I think it's great, is, as you said, you're not there yet, but the advantage is you are aware of what you need to do to get there, so that you are taking the steps, as you say, with the marketing, the systems, the processes, the branding, to differentiate yourself, which it will at some point in the future give you what it is you're trying to build. So I think that's great. One question I would love to ask, because this is something, when, in your opinion, should an entrepreneur start thinking about having a will, power of attorney? Like, when, because quite often when they start, right, it's, as you know, it's just madness just to, make some money, pay the bills, stay in business, grow, sell stuff, build something, hire people, go, it's just, and yet it's extremely important they have a will, power of attorney.
Yeah.
When could you tell them is a good time for them to be thinking about it and speaking to someone like yourself?
Right. So let's reframe the will, power of attorney. When do I need those kinds of things? Because I would say, look, soon, when you're born, when you're 18, that's when you need this stuff, right? But with a business owner on the practical side, these wills, these powers of attorney, they are just tools that we use in bigger contingency planning, right? Not just personal contingency planning, but a broader question on business contingency planning. What happens if this happens in my business, right? And there's all kinds of questions when it comes to what that if is, right? Or what we're talking about. I'd say for a business owner that's just started, what they're more should be looking at is insurance. Right? Personal life insurance is when they start, because they probably don't have much of a asset or that their families can realize. And it's like, look, if you're just starting out, yeah, insurance is your best friend when it comes to that, but not too much after that. You got to get these basics covered, because it's not just a matter of, okay, it's a tick the box. Oh, okay, I've got that. Now I can move on with my life. It is, estate planning never ends, right? It is an ongoing journey, and all it does is supposed to reflect what your reality is today. Look, if it all went down, whether that's a death, whether that is I'm not able to speak for myself, I'm alive, then I need to be prepared to be able to do that. And that doesn't mean, I think when you're maybe younger, you're going to spend less of your, call it, year committed to talking about this stuff, and it becomes more and more as mortality increases in as a chance. But I don't think there is, if you've got something that you care about, right? If you've got kids, if you've got assets, if you just don't want to leave your family disaster, because if you think of it, if this is where this is coming and this is coming into play, your family's already been dealt a tremendous tragedy. We don't need to couple that with the not having direction in place or having legal tools in place. And so it's just part of the kit, right? It's just part of it. And that doesn't mean that you need to spend a lot. It doesn't mean that you need to make sure it's done right and that you're educating yourself. But I'd say as soon as you got something that you care about, that's when you should be putting in place, because what that's going to do is going to free up your mind frame to go, okay, at least that's covered. But it starts building your collective and ongoing education, because the point of estate planning is that you build. You start with a foundation, and maybe that's going to be your basic will and power of attorney, but that's your foundation from then on out, and then you're going to continue to have that evolve as you change and evolve over time. It kind of speaks to a question of, as well, when I talk to, new business owners, right? Someone's got an idea, or they're leaving their workplace, or they're buying something from their boss, and now they're going to become the owner. And it's like, okay, I want to incorporate, right? These are all, the good reasons. Yeah, of course, let's incorporate. You're going to make money, right? So let's do it. So, but then it's like, okay, well, let's take a break here. First of all, what's the end game, right? What is the end game? I always think it's beneficial for people to think, where are we going with this and when is it over? Because as entrepreneurs, that's a big thing that I've learned over the day. We have to focus on ending it, right? Because otherwise it's just, and there's nothing wrong with it. Okay, I'm going to keep doing this till I'm 75 and keep drawing a wage till I'm 75. But as entrepreneurs, we usually have other ideas too, right? And so when are you going to move on to that next idea? The idea is to start, build, grow, sell, right? Yeah. And so we have to keep that in mind. And, if I'm asking that of a business owner about what does the end game look like, it's completely analogous to someone, whether they have a business or not. It's like, what's the end game, right? Like, what are you doing? What was this all about? What was this for, right? Yeah. And let's put some things in place, not, because we think we're going to die anytime soon, but we're not in control of that. What we are in control of is right now, right here, we can do something about it. We can make sure people are prepared. We can make sure ourselves are prepared. Is it going to be perfect? Absolutely not. We're talking about a future event. Anything can happen. Yeah. But the idea is at all times, you want to rest your head on your pillow at night going, all right, I've done everything I can. I have thought about this. I've communicated it. I've done right by my family. If it all goes down tomorrow, well, it's not good, but I've done everything that I can. Yeah. So, that's where I would see that it's really about when do you want to start your education about that process that's going to last the rest of your lives.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Sorry, Juliet.
I know that we're almost done with the episode, but there is one question that I'd like to highlight before Steve gets into his questions. One of the big things that came out of, and as Steve mentioned at the beginning, we use Andrew for his legal services for our business and our wills and estate planning. One of the biggest things that came out of when we sat down with you to do our wills for the first time was you actually had us do 2 wills, one for us and one for the business. We've never done that. I mean, Steve had his retail store for 28 years and only ever had 1 will. Mm-hmm. So can you it's fairly significant. It was fairly significant to me. So I'd like you, if you could just take a minute or two to explain why you need 2 wills if you're a business owner.
Right. It's pure and simple. It is the minimization of your exposure to a certain tax that happens on death. Estate administration tax, sometimes referred to as probate fees. Okay. Now, I'm not going to get into the virtues or the red herring that probate is meant, that it's presented as. But the reason here is that, anyone who owns shares in a privately held corporation, and if there's any value in that privately held corporation, would be best served if they had a will that dealt specifically with that. And the reason is pure and simple, is that your shares in a privately held corporation never attract the probate process when you pass away for your executor to deal with. Bottom line is your executor can get their hands on your shares of your privately held corporation and deal with what they need to do after that without needing to go through the probate process. Why that is significant is, bottom line is, it saves you essentially 1.5% of the value of those shares. So if you've got a corporation worth $1 million, just by this simple technique, we call it a multiple will strategy to deal with these shares, it's well worth it, right? It's the closest thing we get to a no-brainer in estate planning. And I make a point of saying there are no-brainers in estate planning. However, this is as close as we get, because when we lump it all, when we only have 1 will, all of our assets are getting dealt with that. And just the way the system works is that if you need to go to probate, you have to tell the court, here is the value of all of my assets that are being disposed of by this will. And even if it's just one piece of property, like a piece of real estate that is attracting probate, you're going to have to lump everything in. Okay. And that includes your shares of your privately held corporation. The point is to segregate your probatable assets from your non-probatable assets. If we want to get into a discussion about what probate actually is, because I know it's it's a boogeyman for most of our community, where we know it's bad and it's living under our bed somewhere. I don't know what it is, but I don't like it. That's another question. But bottom line is, any entrepreneur who owns shares in a privately held corporation and as a part of your estate planning, if you don't have sometimes known as a corporate will, a secondary will, I just like to refer to it as a multiple will strategy. Then talk to your lawyer, or if you don't have an estate planning lawyer, well, I got one for you. They're in Watertown.
Perfect.
That's
Thank you.
great.
And I know, as I said, that was so fundamental when we started down the path with you that I wanted to make sure that we covered it. Okay, so sorry, Steve. I know that.
That's okay. Well, that brings us to our part of the show where we do the Smart Man, Smarter Woman version of James Lipton's Q&A round. And if you're ready, Andrew, all right. So what one word best defines an entrepreneur?
Courage.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Motivational speaker.
What profession would you like never to attempt?
Engineering. It doesn't make sense to me. I just know that's not good for me.
I'm glad it makes sense to engineers, because I think we need them for some stuff. But anyway, that's another discussion.
Even accounting, I was like, maybe because accounting has got to be a go-to answer for a lot of people. Yeah. But no, I can do that.
Okay. What sound or noise do you love?
Popcorn popping.
What book would you recommend every entrepreneur should read?
Okay. Well, this one is a long one, but it's well worth it. It's Warren Buffett's biography, Snowball. Okay. And one of the reasons I do that, and again, I paid plenty of library fines on that one because it's a massive book, but it really spoke to me about the long term, right? Like playing the long game, right? That's what it's about. There's only one game in town. It's the long game, and that speaks to as well for entrepreneurs to say, hey, remember what we're doing here. We're building capital, right? So that we can continue to let it go down that steep hill with sticky snow.
Perfect. When your own entrepreneurial journey is completed, what do you hope your legacy is?
That I will have created a business model for my industry that will change the public perception of lawyers, which basically means that the business model that we create will improve the services, will improve the lives of our community, and lawyers will have built an asset for themselves.
Perfect. And for any members of our audience that would like to connect with you, Andrew, what is the best way for them to do that?
Check out Brown Lawyers PC. That's petercharlie.com. We are on LinkedIn and Facebook, and I think that's about it where we are there. But you can find us there. There's some good stuff there. Subscribe to our newsletter and our Life in Balance newsletter that features that big elephant on the ball, which clearly represents the idea behind that is the elephant in the room and how important it is to discuss those things to improve the quality of life when we've got all of that on the table.
Perfect. Well, we will have your website in the show notes, so people will be able to find it there. So we're going to get to our words of wisdom. And again, had a hard time getting this down to one, but I just flipped a coin, came to these, and I thought this might fit quite well for today. There is no such thing as work-life balance. It is all life. The balance has to be within you. And that's by Sadhguru, who is an Indian yogi. I thought that was a good quote. And before we close out here, do you have any final words, Juliet, you'd like to?
Sure. I guess more than anything, there was so much information in there that I wish that we had more than 45 minutes to dive into some of the things that Andrew said. So we might have to bring Andrew back and tone him back a bit and say, okay, you only get to talk about one thing so we can dive deep into it. There were so many things. So thank you.
The first or the last time that I
No, I agree. I mean, there was a bunch of stuff we wanted to touch on that we didn't get to. So, maybe we'll have to do a series, an Andrew Brown series of podcasts where we can get to all of those. But thank you very much, Andrew. It's been great. Lots and lots of great information for our audience. Thank you again to my awesome co-host. As you know, I couldn't do this without you. And most importantly, thank you to you, our audience, for tuning in and giving us a listen. We sincerely hope you found some value. If you did, please subscribe. You can find us in all the regular places, iTunes, Spotify, Google, or you can go to the website, smartmansmarterwoman.com, and subscribe, and you'll get notified each time we upload a new episode. So thank you very much. Until next time, take good care of yourself and those that you love. Bye for now.